On this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds, we're joined by Marco Pacoda of Raybox Games. We talk about finding your ideal audience through Facebook and subreddits, the importance of your theme, game complexity, and the age of your target audience. Let's get into it.
Game begin.
Let's go.
Lightning bolt, Facebook ad, Facebook ad. That's awesome. Hey everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I'm your host, Andrew Lone, and I'm joined as always by Sean and not Rick. In Rick's place, we have Marco Pacoda of Raybox Game Design, a good friend of the podcast and of the Crowdfunding Nerds. And so welcome to the show, Marco.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. Hello, everyone. Good to kind of talk to you all again, and thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Well, now, you've been on our podcast a couple of times, and we've had a really great time together talking about all sorts of things. But in this episode, it was kind of really spurred on by a decision that you made to take one of your games and make it a little bit more accessible to kids and families and whatnot. So on this episode, the topic that we're aiming to cover is how to decide who your target market is, and really elegance in game design. It's kind of the two areas that we're gonna tackle, and it's not just about. So you really have the ability to decide who your target market is and then make a game, or you make a game and then figure out who your market is and then talk to those people, right? And the decisions you make in the actual game will actually dramatically affect how successful you are, as well as like who you're talking to, you know? And so we've got a lot of, this one's going to be really fun because we'll talk probably more about mechanics and, nerdy game design stuff. But
good. I love that.
Yeah, but I mean, it really makes a huge difference what you're making and how you talk and who you're talking to will have a dramatic impact on, really it's like your positioning of your game. Who are you telling me it's for, and who is it actually for? If there's a disparity between those, then you will not be as successful, bottom line. So a lot of the time, I find designers want to kind of force their game to appeal to a certain demographic, or force their game to appeal to the biggest, gravest mistake is everyone, right? Like, I want this game is for everyone. It's not. You should have haters and you should have rabid fans. And if you do, then it appeals greatly to, a group of people that will buy it, right? And then a group of people that will never buy it. But, that's... Anyway, so let's dive in. Where do you want to begin, Marco? You want to talk about what you were sharing about how, like, you determine your target market, or sometimes you make the game first and decide later, or,
Okay. Yeah, I thought you were going to lead me more on this one. Okay, sure. Yeah. Well, I guess that's what the common statement is. Do you make your game and then find out who your target market is? Or do you go like, I want to sell to these kind of people, and then design the game for who you want to sell it to, right? So I'd say most people will make their game because you make the game you want to make, at least at the beginning. Later on, maybe you're tailoring it for something specific, like even if you're doing it for someone else. But so I mean, to me, the natural thing is to make the game you want to make and then correctly target, find who your target audience is, which will in some ways be you, because you make the game and you love it. So you can start there, and then kind of go from there. And then if you're looking to target, like make a game that fits a target audience, then you got to do some more studying. You got to kind of do some research or whatever, kind of figure out what that target market likes. And this is not mathematics. So some of it, you've got a bit of stats, but it's what do they like? It's hard to sometimes determine that, right? So.
Yeah. So I think what you said is there's such wisdom in this, and I think we've said this on the podcast before, but when you're making a game, a lot of the time, especially if it's your first game, or maybe it's like the your baby, the one that you've been thinking about and working on, and maybe you came out with a card game before and a few games here and there, but the one you've been working on and you're like, this is the big one, that is like your magnum opus to the world. That one, it's oftentimes, I think, designed for people like you. I made Deliverance for me, right?
Yeah.
I was the target market. And I was like, I don't know everything about why I need this. I just know that I do need this. And I started making it. And I find it's a very smart place to start. It's a simple place and a good place to start. I wanted to play a game like this. It didn't exist before. It wasn't on my game shelf before. And I decided I needed to make it. For me, what I always do is I start there. And then when you play test it, you find other people that are like you, that are like, wow, I really wanted a game like this, or I love this mechanic or this interaction. I can't wait to follow and back your Kickstarter when it launches or whatever. Well, you find those people who are raving fans and you learn about them and figure out, why do they like the game? And their answer will be different than why you like the game. So it's a matter of kind of trying to figure out who, what they like, what's the same, what's different.
Yeah, absolutely. And those people, if when you're lucky enough to have them, you also ask them, what other games are you playing? Like, that's the simplest question. It's like, what do you like about my game? Sure, you can go into that, and often they'll like most of the same things, some different. But what other games are you playing? And that's going to really start laying landscape. So when I brought a World War II zombie game, what other games are you playing? Is it Warhammer 40K? Is it Zombicide? Is it other war games? Is it other miniature war games? So those all shape it and then allow you. That's part of what informs you as to who you should bring it to. And of course, we know when we do target marketing with Facebook ads or whatever, you can narrow it down by with the keywords and such things like that. So, and then of course those narrowed down marketing techniques, like when you start putting it out there, just like we know, you'll start seeing what's working and what's not working. So so it's a step-by-step process. But I think I guess one thing I'd like to say is that you got to kind of spend some money, I think, marketing to find out who your market is, not just come out of your brain and what you might find on thing. Like, you got to spend some money and start targeting those people, see what happens. You don't have to spend a ton of money, but you got to spend something. You got to get some of the juices flowing out there, right? And that's a key part of figuring out who you need to bring it to, right? That's basically using marketing guys who know what they're doing for what their talent is to figure out who wants to buy your game. That's part of it.
Yeah. When you know that there are people that want to buy the game, but you're not quite sure who they are, there are a couple of ways to do it. In fact, I've heard from a number of different publishers. One that comes to mind was Brendan McCaskill of Open Owl Studios. They always put a little bit of money on Facebook ads for a game concept that doesn't exactly exist. I want to say there's another company that does this too, Ivy Studios, that is very successful in their marketing. But I could be wrong about that one. But I know that there are other companies that do this, where they'll put a little bit out and kind of gauge people's level of excitement about a particular game. I also think that you can, if you don't invest money, you can invest time. And it's kind of a requirement. You have to play test your game. You've got to, I find that it can be a little bit dicey when you go to, let's say, an unpub event or a protospiel event. That's like if you have your unpublished game and you're trying to play test it and get feedback and whatnot. When somebody's sitting in front of you, they'll say, oh yeah, I liked it, because they don't want to say I hated it and you suck as a designer and I'll never play this garbage again and whatever, right? They're not going to tell that to your face. They don't want to hurt your feelings. But I find some of the most interesting and useful information that I gather from events like that are people's body language. If they're leaning back, if they're leaning forward and into it, if they're talking with other people, if they're on their phone. Sometimes you just get people that are on their phone no matter what. It's like Ryan from The Office. He can't not have his phone, but there are
well,
some people.
I was going to ask, but do you find, like, when you're doing this sort of game testing, which I'm really, like, I'm able to get online through the way I handle my campaigns now is I make a free one available and I offer anyone who play tests it with the proper who follows the proper rules to get a free game, right? And I'll get over 100 something people interested in play testing. So but my question is, even for anyone the people who will be attracted to play test your game are generally people who would be inclined to want to play it or buy it. So that, like you said, you're going to be getting exactly the people who, well, or not exactly, but you're going to at least have a really good chance of getting people who like it. So those players, whether they liked it, if they liked it, then it's good to know what else they play and what they like. And if they didn't like it, also, and if those are actually the same, then it's going to be weird.
Yeah.
So, Marco, I have a question about your playtesting and maybe just your game design in general. Yes. I know you have several games under your belt, so to speak.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, they all use a very similar system. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're all similar. The ones that I have out now, I've created other games before, but the ones that I have out now use the Paths Unknown system, which is that it has a rule system. It has dice that are common across the board, and many of the aspects are common, and they're adjusted per game based on thematics. And in the last case, the Cats of Mont Saint Michel, the last game, it's adjusted for also different age groups. So, but that is correct. But so that makes it easier for me because I've been refining it over time.
Well, that's exactly my point. I think if you've got a system that works well, I know Modiphius has their 2D20 system that they've sort of ported to other games, and they slightly modify it thematically for each game, but it's generally the same. And I think that makes your playtesting easier, right? Because if you have people who jumped on your previous game, it's like, I got this new game, basically foundationally has the same systems. It's far easier for them to get in and start playtesting, and then you can sort of narrow down those differences. So that might be something to think about as well. And for listeners who are designing multiple games, if you got a game system that works, well, maybe just kind of like tweaking that and just putting a new sort of skin on it, and maybe a slightly different theme and different mechanics around that theme. That would be the good first step for your game development process.
There are entire companies that I can think of that are dedicated to doing this. Chipfear Games, Stonemaier Games, they have a very similar, like
Tiny Epic,
what you're kind of getting.
Whatever. Yeah, Tiny Epic Dungeons. Most companies do that. I'd say it's like, why are you like? First of all, if you still enjoy designing those, like tweaking them, then that's your sure sale because you're going to have all of your fans. Right. But Sean, the thing is, like, it is easier for me to get playtesters now, but I have to start somewhere. And you got to just make your first good game, like the one that you like, that works, that people like, and that plays well. And then you can worry more about, like, if it's good enough, whether you should take it to the next level. But every game can find playtesters by, basically offering free games and stuff to people to do it. Now they'll have to print it out, and it's a process. But you'll find a lot of people on the print and play groups love doing that. So and they just enjoy giving feedback, and so it's there for everyone to be able to use it. I'm using it quite effectively, and I think And so, of course,
some of what when you start with a group like that, let's just say you find a group of people that are generally willing to play test games. So what you do is you share what the game is. And I try not to embellish. It's like, this is an epic, awesome, incredible, you're using adjectives. Rather, my advice to those listening is do not use adjectives and just say what it is. Like, Deliverance. This is a game about angels and demons battling over saints and whatever. And it's like that, the theme is there. And some people will say, well, that sounds very interesting. Other people will say, oh, I'm kind of turned off by that theme or whatever. Like when we're talking World War II zombies, some people are going to be like, I'm in. Other people are like, I like, Euro games and
I don't like zombies basically or whatever.
Yeah. And so
thankfully a lot of people like them.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, one major difference between what you're talking about and what I was talking about with the Unpub Protospiel in-person events, the people who sit down at your table, it's like completely randomized. It's like people have no idea what this is, and now they're sitting down, and now you get to play with them. So they might hate zombies, but sit down at your zombies game. And what is nice about asking people online, and what it sounds like, is you have a tabletop simulator mod that you will, or the ability to actually like print and play files, right? And so
Make them
I
turn you
used
down. It takes a lot of
yes.
energy to do that. So
Definitely, yes. So I have a tabletop simulator mod that I used, and of other for other games as well.
sure,
Tabletop
sure.
simulator is kind of my
No,
thing,
and it's good too. Yeah.
and so when you give your description, the short description, then people volunteer themselves. So it's like the first qualification, like you've got a level of qualification of this is the theme and this is kind of what you do, cooperative or
Yeah.
competitive or whatever. So you'll get people to volunteer themselves that think they like it, which I think is an excellent way to go. If you don't get anybody to volunteer themselves, that could be your first sign of a problem. Like this is a game about matching sets, and all you have to do is match 3 sets and you win. And then you get
Right.
nobody asking about it. And it's like, well, it just is not that interesting. But when you've got a game like yours, which is this really, I mean, just tell us just a little bit about Cats of Mont Saint Michel, just so that
Sure.
people kind
Well,
of know
yeah.
about it.
Well, the cat. Look, you're playing cat. Cat's and other furry animals, right? And you're basically the heroes, and you're fighting against the vermin army. It's set in France, at Mont Saint Michel, which is a monastery that's 100 meters into the Atlantic Ocean, and it's set during the French Revolution. So it's got all steeped in like history and costuming and
Mhm.
swords and all kinds of stuff like that. And like you get, like it ties into like Redwall and Mice and Mystics and those type of games and stuff like that. So you're actually playing cats, and there's like one dog, Friedrich, and there's like actually you could play an owl whose name is Athena. So there's a few other animals, and
Mhm.
you're basically there to defeat the vermin army, the Crimson Cardinal, which is like the Rat King, and save the humans, from themselves, I guess,
Yeah.
and from plague and whatever. And like you are adventuring in Mont Saint Michel, in the monastery, the city, or at the bakery, or you're at the well, you're at the graveyard or whatever, and you're doing all kinds of stuff in this particular game, which is a story-driven game. Plays like the other paths are known as on a book. So you're playing on the right side of the page with the instructions on the left. And it's a narrative campaign with a kind of choose your own adventure style. So
Yep.
it's you're in the game.
That's awesome.
And you can play with miniatures. It comes with miniatures or not. So it's an option. It's not forcing. It's not a game that you have to buy the miniatures or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I think it sounds fantastic to me just already. My kids, I know my kids would probably really love this too. And I'm always, as a parent, I'm always looking for games that I like that my kids will also gravitate towards. So it's
Yeah,
really good.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
I would say that the big thing about this and any of the games that make, or if you want to do these kind of games, is the characters. So the characters have a lot of character, and they're like, when you read their backgrounds, they're mysterious or they're funny or there's something about them, but you immediately start like galvanizing kind of your feelings towards it. Oh, this is so cool. So
yeah.
it's an emotional little ride to get there. And I think that's super special. And the kids really dig it because when they read, oh, this guy's so cool. Like there's the ninja cat named after one of my daughters, actually, Mira. And then there's the wizard cat named after a different daughter, Adara. And, and then you have like the barbarian ginger cat named Stumpy, and it's really fun. And sorry, I went on a bit further, but I was getting excited about the characters aspect.
Well, I think that's really cool. And so now you've got people that volunteer themselves and say, I'd like to learn about this one. I'd like to try this one. And they print it out, and then they give you a range of feedback. And some of the feedback is going to be, oh, you should change this, that, and the other. Right. And they don't mechanically, or they don't have a mechanical understanding like you do of the actual game and what those things might do. It's like, oh, you should make this ninjas instead of cats. It's like, thank you
Right.
for your feedback, but I'm not making those changes. But then you
Yeah.
have other people that will give you really good feedback that educates you on what your target market likes. What's one example of feedback that you received that was like hit you between the eyes, like, I need to lean into that, or that's something that kind of breaks the immersion of my target market? Was there anything like that that kind of stands out to you?
Yeah. For my previous games design, some people didn't like the fact that you had to choose a facing for your character, which way they're looking this way, or you turn them, they're looking that way, and they hated that. And there was a bunch of people that didn't like that, although tons of people did like it the way it was done. So to me, it was okay, well, how that educated me was I like that rule where you have facing for World War II and zombies. But I don't really need it for the Viking one, which was the third one, and I don't really need it for the cats. And it feels like the people who don't like it are pretty vocal. So why don't I customize the rules to work within that dynamic, not have a facing, but at the same time keep tactical depth. So the people who previously enjoyed having facing, but maybe didn't even care whether it was there or not, are still enjoying this game. That was a transition that I did from an earlier rule set, which works well for that, and this new rule set, which now would be basically just by doing that would become a bit more accessible for a lot of people because we don't have to worry about which way the guy's looking or where they're pointing their gun or whatever. So
Right.
that's a
Yeah.
big one that happened, and it was a very conscious choice.
That's
And
awesome.
Marco, has anyone ever commented on the amount of missions you present in your game? So one thing that really struck me was when I got my hands on Escape from Stalingrad Z was just the amount of missions you have in that book. I think it's approaching 50 missions, I think. So there's a lot of content in this little box. So it's kind of like it's like, wow, there's a lot there.
So I mean, anecdotally, that was the first big game I did in many years, and it had tons of missions, got so much stuff. We've been slowly reducing the amount of missions because it's a lot of work. And like Stalingrad Z, to be honest, for the amount of hours and pages of material and maps, that's like $100 game. It's just like so much stuff. You can, if you laid out the maps, it's the size of a 4x, like huge. The place, anyways. So yes, people have commented they've had a really good time playing the game with the amount that's there. Obviously, there's a lot. And I've kind of reduced it because what I've discovered, this is another thing about discovering, is I put too much into that game. I mean, I don't want people to think that people who own it, of course, can appreciate the depth of that game and how much is there. And some people will play it again and again and go through it. And there's different paths, right? But from a design point of view, I look for a more efficient way to create scenarios that I could have less material but still have plenty of depth, and figured out a matrix that works with that. So that was a big change because it lightened our workload, allowed me to really make it feasible to create more games. Because at the level we did Stalingrad, to keep doing those, I would take me a long time. I just wouldn't be able to keep making them. And Project Riza was when I discovered it. So it has 43 scenarios or odds. It has not too many scenarios, but a lot. And after that, I've kind of whittled it down to make it make more sense. But that's definitely learning from, not even that it was a mistake. It's just that it's not, let's just do it a better way. Let's figure out another way we can make this just as exciting. People will still love it. They're going to get as much play out of it, but we just structure in a way that will allow me to do it at a manageable level, right? So
yeah, this is a really important point, because I actually encountered this with Deliverance, where I decided, so I did maybe 2,000 play tests with just the skirmish mode of play, and then we decided we're going to add a campaign on top using all of the elements of skirmish mode and just kind of give you really interesting skirmish experiences with a kind of a campaign that you progress your character over each mission. And it was a big win. And what I decided to do was I thought, I could turn this into like a Gloomhaven. Gloomhaven has 150 missions in the box. But then when you think about it, if you're familiar with Gloomhaven, you've got 150 missions in the box, bunch of different characters, and you'll experience between 60 to 90 missions through like the whole course of a game. You won't experience all the missions, but then so there's some incentive to replay and everything, but Gloomhaven's like the biggest example. The thing though is, if you look at the way that Gloomhaven actually plays, you have a character that you start with, and that character will retire after between 10 and 20 missions. So you will change your character between 10 and 20 missions. It's like 15 to 20. And that causes the experience to feel fresh. If you played the same character for 100 or whatever 90 missions, like you would in Gloomhaven, I would wager to say that the experience, people would not get as many games in as they do. So
Right.
what
They'll
I
get bored of
decided
your
to
city,
do,
basically, right?
yeah. So what I decided to do with Deliverance was I wanted to make a strong 14 mission campaign that people would finish. I wanted people to actually finish it and, actually get into it and play it a bunch. My goal was to, if I could get people to play it more times, then people will enjoy it more and have a higher opinion of it and that kind of thing. If people open the box and, have a hard time unboxing and then maybe play half a skirmish with the intent to play the campaign and never get to it, that's a fail for me. So I
Right.
wanted people to be able to jump in and play right away, not feel completely overwhelmed. But then also I wanted to add in that richness of, for people that really love it, play all the 14 missions in a weekend or something. What's left for that player? And so what I decided to do is I decided to do campaign challenges, which allow you to play the same missions with new victory conditions and new, like, harder enemies and other things like that, so that you must play through, the majority of missions in the campaign, get a bunch of experience, and then come back to, a much more difficult puzzly version of the mission you just played. And so players really loved that. They found a lot of positivity in that. But what I noticed, so I polled my audience and I got about 400 responses, or 400 and change. And I asked them, among other things, guys, because I wanted to make a game that people wanted, right? So I polled them and we went over it in past podcasts. I want to say within the last 5 or 10 podcasts, we did analysis of our poll, of our feedback form. And I asked people if they had played a campaign mission or not. Like, have you played the campaign? And it was yes or no. And for people that said yes, I asked how many missions. Only for the people that said yes. Have you played 1 to 5 missions? Have you played 6 to 12? Have you played 12? Are you on mission 12 to 14? Or have you finished all of the missions? And so what I found was very interesting was that about 80% of our people had finished at least 5 missions. They were on missions 6 to 12. We had some, I want to say it's actually like 15% of people were on missions 1 to 5. And then maybe 85% of people had played at least 5 missions. And, you had, about a quarter of the people, so 25% of people had finished the entire thing. And then, but the vast majority of people were on mission 6 to 12. It's like a third of the people were on mission 6 to 12.
What do you think that told you?
That told me the first 5 missions are the most important 5 missions in the box.
Okay. You got to get them hooked and going, right?
Definitely. And actually, I think in the way that the campaign works, the first 5 missions are generally variations of destroy all monsters. The first 4 missions are the tutorial, which I wanted people to play. I was very happy to see that people went through the first 4 missions, because after you complete mission 4, you know how to play the game. You can bust out the scenario, you can bust out the skirmish, you can bust out.
Is this solo? Solo?
Yeah, you can solo it. It's a really good solo experience. Actually, we just got awards for solo. It's nice.
Nice. But that's great. And did it lead you to see the type of person you were targeting, or did it change kind of what you thought about who you targeted to, because the campaign mode maybe is a different audience, or
it did?
How did that?
So I asked, among other things, what's your favorite mode in the game? And by far, it was like 65% or more of the people liked the campaign mode the best. And which was funny, because the skirmish was what we spent all the time on to get the system right. But the campaign reorganized things into interesting, tests of skill or whatever. And we had this mechanic we added called the Lieutenant, which was basically a boss that is printed directly in the campaign book, that has a very, we'll say, it's not exactly this way, but like a one trick to the boss. So it's not as dynamic as a Fallen Prince, which has its own darkness deck. It's, some more randomization of what happens, an ability to get stronger and more custom with talents and whatnot that you can apply to those bosses. These bosses are like, this guy deals 1 more damage every round. and eventually he's going to just one shot everybody, and it feels
Right,
good to
right,
beat that guy, but it's not quite as like super duper replayable as say, one of those Fallen Princes I mentioned earlier. But people
right.
really loved that. They just loved it. And
I wonder
so
if that's if
Mhm.
that's a growing thing. Like I know for sure solo is growing. I know I won't buy a game that doesn't have a solo mode now. If it doesn't have solo, I'll be like, yeah, I'll pass. I'll get. I only can play so many games, so might as well have one that I can play if I'm not going around. So I think that's a growing trend, and I think that as far as when you're doing targeting, solo. I mean, unless you can't do it, you should have a solo mode. I would like I think that's 30 to 40% you'll lose off. It used to be like 50
yeah.
to 20%.
Mhm.
Now it's got to be closer to 40% if you can't bring the solo mode in. So that's an important thing to consider. Almost every gamer, not every gamer, but many gamers now, especially since COVID,
Right.
like to have a solo game. You know,
Right.
um,
It's just you give
and
people another reason to back the game. It's like,
yeah,
well,
yeah. When,
people
when
they,
I when this game shows up, I can open it and play it right away if I want it.
right.
Maybe I
Mhm.
won't, but if I want to, I can do it like the same
Yeah.
day. It doesn't matter if no one else is in town or like my group doesn't only gets together once a
Mhm.
month. And they're gonna be playing BattleTech anyway, so I'm not gonna get a chance to
Yeah.
play it when I want, like whatever it happens to be, right? So,
Yeah, and
like I
or
guess
people
overall,
will
when you're
teach themselves like half of a game. They'll play half a skirmish game solo, and then they'll be like, "Okay, I'm ready to teach my group," right? And
yeah,
so
there's
it's
that too. Absolutely.
yeah,
If you're doing skirmish games, like I mean, the listeners here could be doing all kinds of games. Obviously, when I started designing games, I found that I was more in the minority, and that everyone else on uh, Facebook, not everyone, but there was a lot more people doing kind of more mainstream style games or Euro games or whatever. And I was like talking about zombies and like different types of weapons in World War II, historical aspects to it. And like everyone's like, like because that's not the type of games that were being designed by a majority of the people on the on Facebook and those groups that I was part of. Then of course there are specific groups, and that's where you have to find it. That's where you're gonna. So that's the point is that there's groups for everything on Facebook. So go with your. Who do I think I'm targeting? I think I'm targeting solitary war gamers. Mine's World War II. It's got zombies. So I go to. Okay, I'll talk to people there. I'm also doing. Obviously, it's post-apocalyptic. So Ada's playing apocalyptic games. There's several different ones on Facebook. So I'll go talk to those people. And now you're going to be talking for free to potentially thousands. All those have thousands and thousands, and you can reach people who will give you their opinion, whether you like it or not, uh, by discussing your game with them on Facebook. So the solitary war gamers, they really like more historical stuff. They're not really into things. So I've discovered I'm not going to market it. I mean, there might be some who play, but I'm not going to market to those guys. They've got their own kind of thing. They're usually a little bit older. They're playing with little counters and stuff, which is totally cool because I did that too. But they're not really big on miniatures, but you'll get some. But that's not where I want to focus. So what I'm saying is that Facebook and the groups in Facebook is a key aspect to you finding out who likes your games. There's at least hundreds, if not thousands, of different game groups that you type in Euro games, you'll get a group. Type in Euro games with trains, you'll get a group. Type in Euro games with gardening, you'll get a group. Type in zombies, you'll get 50 groups. You type in World War II zombies, then you get a few. You know what I mean? And they're there, and that's a really good way to access it. And they're just waiting there for you to ask them questions. Hey, I'm working
yeah,
on this cool thing, and you share a piece of art. What do you think? Like, try to do a pointed question, right?
yeah,
And get some feedback, do a poll if they let you. That's. But start by I would say even those groups, just introduce yourself. Hey, I'm a designer. I'm working on this Euro train style game, but I want to set it in Japan because I think they got the cool bullet trains and we want to do all about bullet trains and like whatever and whatever. So okay,
mhm,
this is cool. There's probably a bullet train. There may be one out there already, but now you're kind of saying, oh, this is kind of specific. It's kind of cool. Do we like it? Like, yeah, nobody's interested in it's not, it's whatever it is. Or
yeah,
this is amazing. Like, nobody's done this before. Like I want to do a game, for example, that's set on an aircraft carrier during World War II. There's no game out there with an aircraft. Whenever I share that with people, they're like, "Oh my god, that's amazing! It's like a listless aircraft carrier. Japanese are just floating, and the American Marines like board it to see what's going on. There's something going on." So it's like, this would be awesome. But that's the reaction I got to that concept, and like literally, people when I tell that concept who are into this kind of game, they're like, they don't even know what to say. They're just like, "This is so juicy." So, anyways, I guess the point is that.
Yeah.
After
Well, I think
Facebook's
for
a good
me, it's all about like, first, who is my target market? So identifying who the people are that I want to talk to. Number two is like what you have been saying. Where do I find them? How do I what circles do they travel in? Where do they congregate? Groups on Facebook, I think, is a gold mine. And then lastly, I think this is where everybody has such a hard time. What do I say to get people interested? And I think people make a mistake by saying everything that they can possibly say all in one single post. And they turn it into like this giant essay with a link to their website. It's like, check out my website here and whatever. And they get one like, and it's themselves, because they're just nobody that sees it. Facebook has its own algorithm, and actually every location, whether it's Reddit, you've got subreddits, you've got Discord communities and Facebook groups. Those tend to be really great sources.
Spaces.
Yes, exactly. Board Game Geek.
I don't even know what how X Spaces is. Sounds like a video game.
It's probably a place filled with bots,
I'm more familiar with the triple X Spaces, but anyway.
Yeah. I think they call that OnlyFans now. So but you go to those places, and then there are these like nuances. Do I know? I know nothing of this. So there are some nuances to communication. Like if you go to a Reddit, like a subreddit, and you join, and the first thing you do is post a link to your game, your post is probably going to get deleted, and people will make fun of you. If it doesn't get deleted, you'll be ratioed into oblivion, where people laugh at you and make fun of you and don't take you seriously. So there are these nuances to each, we'll say group, each location that people tend to congregate. Yeah. And so I think one of the keys is to find. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think, like, because you mentioned it already, is this, because just to guide people here a little bit, right? Is start by introducing yourself, whether even the Reddit, just say, "Hi, I'm not here to spam you guys. I just want to let you know I love this topic." Whatever, obviously you're following the topic that your game is connected to, and just introduce yourself. So that's the first step, right? Get people just to know who you are. And some people just from that introduction will say, or might say, "Oh, what kind of games you design?" Like we'll ask. That's your in, right? What you want to do is get people to ask you stuff. So, like Andrew was saying, there is a methodology. But I just wanted to say that people, like, you start with your introductions. I think we'd agree. Or do you agree, Andrew? Yeah, because they give them a little guidance of what to do, because there's so many different things out there where you can talk and where you're going to get banished if you're spamming. And that's the biggest thing that comes up, is when you're being spammed. So talk about what you like. Talk about the games and stuff that's in that topic that you're in. Talk about that. And then and when you're talking about that, you can mention your own stuff in there too, or like, "Oh, I really got inspired by Redwall to create my game things and whatever, but I haven't seen a Redwall game. I wonder if it'd be cool if one would come out." And then someone will go, "Oh, I wish there was a Redwall board game too." And then, but it sounds like what you're doing is that. It goes, "Yeah, it's kind of my passion now." Like, you create conversations, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's about talking about your like interests. So the methodology, like how to get people moving on it, is that's how you bring it in. And see how other people do it too.
In terms of game design, I'd like to go back, just maybe take a little step backwards. But in terms of looking at Facebook groups or even subreddits, I think that itself, it demonstrates interest around a particular theme, right? So if you like to type of flamingos and you want to make a flamingo game, but you just find nothing on flamingos, well then maybe you need to change it to exotic birds or something. Maybe because you might find an exotic birds group, right? So it might even help you form themes and concepts. Like, okay, well,
refine,
let's
at
go
least
through this group.
refine your theme, right? Because you still want to do it about birds, but you just realize now it's not flamingos. You're only switching it to something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that brings up another thing. Notice what we're talking about. We're talking about flamingos, and we're talking about, whether it's zombies or it's post-apocalyptic or it's, demons and angels. We're talking theme. Mm-hmm. So nobody, for the most part, when you're trying to find your audience, course mechanics are part of it, but I think, anyways, you start with theme. People who like thematically like high fantasy. That if you're creating a high fantasy game, your first level of target is someone who likes high fantasy, right? If I'm targeting a zombie game, it's people who like zombies. So you already kind of know where you're going. Their age almost doesn't matter, I don't think. Like, are they 14 or are they 66? Doesn't really matter. When you're doing the marketing, your age bracket's usually pretty broad because who knows who likes playing zombies, right? Or whatever it is. That's the way I feel. I think thematics are the biggest aspect to finding out who's going to buy your game. Mm-hmm. And then it's about difficulty level, right? Yeah. So then you're looking at how complicated do they want this to be? And of course, if you hit mid-range, really, let's face it, the middle will get you the most. Then, maybe slightly under mid will get you the most. But it still has to be engaging and can't be friggin' boring. I made boring games. I played them. I hated them, and I made them.
Yeah, all our games started out boring, right? Like that's what a really great game
actually, mine was really good.
That's so funny.
The one I released was actually really pretty good off the start. But I've made other ones since that are boring.
Yeah, what was I gonna say? This concept of
I disrupted you. You were talking about Reddit and how you have
no. That's I was off of something that you were getting at, which I really loved. So. There were two things I wanted to cover. One is about I learned how to really, really sell Deliverance. We went most recently to Origins, and the what I found really important is exactly what you said about the theme. So it's really areas of innovation. What people want is, so when you give them when they look at your booth or when they look at your product, they want to see something that interests them. And of the people that see something that interests them, they'll come up to you. And if you're in person or, running a booth at Origins or a convention, or maybe they'll ask a question that generally boils down to the same thing. Give me your just quick 30-second pitch on what this is.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that's like, I don't need any frills and adjectives. I just want to understand what it is. It's just like if somebody's like, hey, Marco, what do you do? And if you're a dentist, you're not like, or I don't know, like for me, I'm a marketing guy. I used to have this thing. I would say like, oh, I'm a brain surgeon. I operate on people's thinking. People, it's funny, yes, but people don't really want to know. They're like, well, so I no. What do you really do? I just want to put you in a box. Like, oh, I do digital marketing. Oh, so you're a website guy, and they just like, all right, website guy, box, and or whatever it is, right? Like, oh, you do Facebook ads, So they just want a quick answer.
Psychological operations officer.
Yeah, so you might your FBI agent that's listening to you might have an opinion about that.
Yeah, I'm probably on some list.
Yeah. Oh yeah, so many lists. But so the idea is that after that 30-second pitch, if they're interested, the best thing to tell them from that point on, what I decided, and it totally worked so beautifully for me, was tell them about what is innovative. And so if they're still interested, it's like, oh yeah, would you like to learn more? And it's like, yes. And so instead of would you like to learn more, what I started to ask people was, would you like to hear what other players like about this, or what other reviewers found innovative about this? The answer is always yes. And we do three things for Deliverance in particular. Number one is the artwork, which people, if I'm at a convention, people can see it. Or, if there's a link, people can go there and see it. So I just touch on that one. But then mechanically and thematically are the two lines. So the theme is a big deal. If it's a theme that people don't have on their shelf, they're immediately interested. Luthier is a project that we just launched, or we helped Dave Beck launch this last week. And it's currently, as I look, it's like number 2 hotness on Board Game Geek. It's going to be number 1 hotness just real soon. But that game mechanically is very similar to Distilled, which was very successful about brewing or
Yeah.
distilling whiskey, right? Distilling
Yeah,
spirits.
yeah.
But this game
Yeah.
is all about making musical instruments, and very different theme that people generally don't have on their shelf. But mechanically,
Yeah.
you've got a lot of the same DNA from distilled, but the theme is a big deal. So that is
Big
one
deal.
way to innovate, I think. You know, if you
And
find a way, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say one way to innovate theme is combining themes. And I might have
Yep.
mentioned this on earlier podcasts, but I really want to kind of harp about this. So when you take two themes and put them together, often you can create, I mean, it doesn't always work, create something kind of unique. So, and something that could be quite interesting and engaging to pique people's interest, to even get them a chance to like even ask you a question. So, you know, World War II zombies, it's been done before, but board game wise, not really. And we, you know, oh, that's interesting. World War II zombies, okay. But, you know, cats and fantasy's been done before too. So, but it's still, it's a narrowing down. If I was going to do a cyberpunk game, I probably wouldn't just do a cyberpunk game. I'd be like, I'm going to do a cyberpunk game if the Aztecs were still around. So it's like a cyberpunk game with Aztec, at least kind of imagery and stuff like that, and some of their old gods still creeping in and screwing up.
Yep.
You know, whatever, you know, so it's like, oh my
Cyberpunk
God.
2012.
Yeah, whatever, right? So the idea is find two things you like and put them, smash them together. It's like a thematic smash up. You know, you gotta still be clever about it. You can't be any, you know, it could be like vampires and donuts. There's probably something there, you know. So you know, you could do vampire, you know, or vampire, or like the Vampire Diner, right? So well, there could be a game there. Like, who knows what's going to go on, right? What's a Vampire Diner game? Well, I gotta check it out. Like, come on, you would check it out. It sounds kind of interesting, right? So I think that the smashing together of things, first, it kind of narrows. It gives people something they don't already have, but still gives them something that they're familiar with. So they know vampires. They know what a diner looks like and what goes on. So that would be, how would that work? So that's kind of the question. How would that work? Like, that's be interesting enough for them to care. That would be cool, I think, you know, whatever, right? So
I'll say, like, there's one thing that does not work with theme, and that is when you're speaking to a customer. It does not work when you tell them it's like this combined with that, with a little bit of the other thing mixed in. If any one of those pieces, if they don't have, it's like, you know, Deliverance is like Gloomhaven mixed with This Present Darkness, the book, mixed with Zombicide. If they don't understand what any one of those components are, then they are completely lost. And
the thing is, if it's like this within the kind of natural responses, well, then why would I play it if I can just play that? You know, it's like Gloomhaven. Well, then I'll just play Gloomhaven then, you know.
Gloomhaven's a better version of what you've got.
Yeah. But I mean, this is beyond, a little bit beyond the scope. What we're trying to determine is, how do we reach our audience, right? So who's our audience? Like, who is it?
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of good information here, and I think what people kind of need is a roadmap. When I was starting, when you guys were starting, what is even the first thing I do? So, you know, I think we can give them a roadmap of starting on, you know, well, first of all, designing a game that you're passionate about. Of course, everyone talks about that. Then finding the groups on Facebook. Let's just start there. Introducing yourselves to the groups, talking about your theme, finding places that like your theme, and engage with those people in a meaningful way where it's not just about your game. So it takes time. It's time. That's time. And then spend a bit of money working with someone who knows what they're doing to put some ads out there and see what's clicking. And that's going to narrow it further. And that's just a few steps that you can start today. Anyone who's got a game can start figuring out who their thing is today. And just go on Facebook, start typing in. That's how we do it. Just type in names and look for groups that make sense. And sometimes a whole bunch of groups that have nothing to do with it. That's fine. And to find the ones that and when you go to that group, by the way, you check the previous posts. Do they have a lot of likes? If you're going through there and there's a lot of people just kind of talking about themselves and there's almost no likes, then that's probably not going to be very fruitful. So you want to find a place, you know. And I can say another big thing. If you can put together, this is anyone who create a PNP version of your game, even if it's a limited version of it, but they still can play it. The PNP sites are now a bonanza of awesome gamers. And if I go on there, or if you go on there, say I'm working on a game and I have a PMP, and anyone who's if anyone's interested, let me know, or put a link right away, or try to engage with them so that they ask for a link. And those people are passionate about that stuff. They like to talk about games. They like to craft games. They're like, once you guys are almost we're at the same level. Like, we're designing them and they're making them. So there's a really good thing there. So there's Martin's Print and Play, and there's a few other ones, and that's a great place to, if you just spend some time and create a PNP version of your game, and you'll find a lot of people who will give you good feedback there, and then you can find out what they like and why. Anyone who's going to print out your game and spend hours doing it, that thematically they like the thing you're doing, right? Because that's a lot of work, right? So then you can talk to those people and encourage them. So that's a very good source for people to start finding out.
That's awesome. Go ahead, Sean.
One thing I think we maybe should get into is designing games for your audience that doesn't exist yet. When I was a child, Warhammer.
But before you go down, sorry, when you say doesn't exist yet, do you mean from a thematic or from a mechanical point of view?
No, I mean from age, right? So when I was a child, Warhammer was Warhammer, and pretty much Warhammer is pretty much still the same as it was when I was a child. But there's other publishers who've produced games, and they've very much created their games with a generation in mind. So an example of this would be Crash Bandicoot. When I was a child, Crash Bandicoot was for kids. And then when I became a tween, they had the Jack series, and that was age appropriate for that. Then when I got a teenager and older, they had the Uncharted series. And when I became an adult, they had The Last of Us. So their games in maturity grew with a particular generation. So you could, from childhood to adulthood, play all their games, and they sort of moved along with their that generation. I think Harry Potter is similar to this, where the beginning of the books are kind of like lighthearted, and then they kind of get quite dark as you progress through the books. I know this is something that you're doing now, Marco. So you obviously have to be a step ahead, right? Because if you're creating like a children's game, and you want to then plan for a game to exist and 5 years from now that's sort of slightly more mature, you have to start that now, don't you? So it's almost as if you kind of like predict the future to be like one step ahead. I know you've kind of done that backwards, but that's maybe something we can talk about backwards, as well.
Yeah. I think that it's interesting because you look at a company like Disney, for example. Disney, we all grew up with Disney movies, and from like I grew up watching Aladdin and loving that, and Aladdin eventually became Prince of Persia, and Prince of Persia became Assassin's Creed. And then they took us back full circle with live action Aladdin and other movies that are actually like just a different way to tell the same exact story. It's like, oh, this is Chinese Aladdin, where the guy finds a bottle that has a dragon genie inside it or whatever.
Yeah. It's all like retheming it, basically, right?
Yeah. And so I think that originality, so like we make something original, like Deliverance, fairly original. It is an adult game. It is not for children. And because it's, the theme, and like you talk to the devil, like I don't want 6-year-olds playing with this by themselves with no context. Like parents will
like the Ouija board.
Yeah, well, it's like not quite as gnarly, but it's just not meant for little children. But then if I wanted people to understand and to appreciate and to have fun with the theme, and I wanted to appeal to a group that is not my target market, I would need to I would need to create a new product that rethemed and maybe just decrease some of the complexity in the mechanics and other things like that. And that's kind of where we were talking about a little bit of, we teased elegance in game design. And Marco, that's something that you've done with this other game. Like you've taken a system that works really well, and you've stripped things out purposefully to appeal to like a wider audience, or like families, or smaller children, or whatever.
Yeah, in fact, the trajectory was in the point form was like World War II zombie game. Okay, I've got that cornered and working on that. What's another genre? So Vikings. So we got more fantasy. I think fantasy obviously is a big aspect. Let's do a Viking game, fantasy game, and then put that one out. So that was an evolution. Even that changed along the way. And then after I put the Viking out, it was like, I mean, I talked to Tom Frank, who's my co-designer on this stuff, had suggested Cats of Mont Saint Michel, and I was like, yeah, why don't we do something fresh, like different from all this really dark? Because Stalingrad Z and those, they're violent, like they're violent games, really violent. Like, so that's okay. I mean, that's I like playing violent games, but I wanted to create something a bit more, family friendly. So it originally was going to be, I'm going to reduce the amount of rules so that 8 or 9-year-olds can play, and they can play with their family. And so we started designing it, and I was having trouble. Like, I did bring it down. I brought it down. I brought it to the point where you could teach your 11-year-old to play. And then thematically, though, that got a little bit darker with the art, not like dark, but it wasn't really kiddie. So it kind of, I couldn't create a game that was for the kids anymore. But I did end up managing to create a game that was reduced in scope as far as rules are concerned. That exercise to do that actually still created a tactically satisfying game that I would say is equally satisfying, just because it's following a different path to create, the joy that you get out of tactical war game. And it's still tactical, games that you're doing with cats, right?
Yep.
So that was a great process, and it came over that way, and it went down a bit, and I finally adjusted it definitely to reach a different market. Like, it's a different market, but of course the fans of my other games, many of them also want to get this game because they love the system. So they're like, I'm in. This looks cool. Or they remember when they were kids playing, Redwall or Warrior Cats and all this other stuff. So we was tapping into that. So kind of choosing Cats was a game where it was like, I want to design. The first two were the first games I want to design because I really, really want to do this. And that game was more like, this is the market. How do I design for it? Mm-hmm. And what happened in the end was I never created the game I intended. The Cats of Mont Saint Michel never became a kids game. So I created a kids game called The Kittens of Mont Saint Michel to satisfy that aspect. And The Kittens of Mont Saint Michel is basically the cats, but as kittens. And it's like a card-friendly kids game, right? And instead of like fighting rats and all that sort of stuff, and there's a whole interesting story about aspects to creating that game. But basically, in the end, it was that we don't need to have fighting so much, but what we realized, or what I realized, was that these are kittens who are going to become warriors. So what this game about, The Kittens, is about, it's about gaining warrior virtues, gaining like courage and humility and patience. That's what The Kittens are about. Mm-hmm. And then it clicked and it fit. And it was like, and then what Sean said, the people who play the kittens, eventually, hopefully they'll be playing the cats later, because I played the kittens and now the cats and whatever, right? And that was designed very specifically for a target market at that point, because I kind of failed on the first one. I was trying to design it, it didn't work. So it's like I really had to focus and buckle down and go, okay, I am targeting families, and I want the mom to go in a store, see the cover, and go, and it's going to be $20 game, like it's completely accessible. So price-wise and art-wise, and they just go, how can I not buy this cute kitten game with and if you saw the cover art, it's like, it's a Disney style art. It's like designed for people to love it. Like, you can't, even if you don't like cats, you're like, kind of cute. Like, it's really cute, right? But anyway, so in that case, this whole evolution is how it went. And the game, which is going to launch August 6th, the kittens part of it is just going to be an add-on. Like, it's not even going to be a campaign for the kittens. You buy the cats, and I'm going to do the kittens, and maybe I'll print 2,000 or 3,000, and we'll see. But I also designed the kitten game to be at the price point and the rules level, like it's like maybe 4 pages of rules maximum with all of the examples, that it's potentially can end up in Target or Walmart or in the bookstores. Like, it has the potential. It's like under $20.
Price point is really important for your target market in particular.
For that it is. Yeah, it becomes huge. Yeah.
Now,
but that's an evolution of how that happened. Yeah.
Yeah. So mechanically, one of the important things, I think there's one concept that comes up in my mind where every once in a while I'll encounter a designer, they can't get out of their own way. That is like, the game needs to be like this. And they add this. There's a particular example that I'm thinking of in my head that I don't want to say because they might even be listening right now. I don't know. But they're like, no, this system needs to remain in the game because it adds richness. But then the target market is not prepared to handle that level of complexity. So they are just convinced that it must exist. But the problem is, at the end of the day, when you release it, the market will tell you if it was a success or not, or if you missed.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
just
he
think
has
that
to change
sometimes
his
it
target
just,
market.
well, yeah, exactly. But I mean, the problem is that it's
Not big.
yeah, like if you make a game, there's not always a target market that's very big that wants to buy it. You will have people that are passionate about a thing, especially the more narrow and niche you go, but then you can get to a point where nobody's passionate enough about it. And I think that complexities for the sake of complexity
you've
is
niched too much, and you've hit the niche Balrog.
hit the Balrog, dude. Yes, exactly. So I find that sometimes you just have to, as a designer, you have to get out of your own way and listen to what your people are saying and put yourself in the position to receive a lot of feedback. I think that's where a lot of the time people go wrong is they get just a little bit of feedback from family and friends and from people that they know would like crunchy hardcore mechanics and like, yes, I'm going to make this game for everyone, and it's just that good and whatever, but they don't ever put it into a place where their target market has to actually learn from the rule book before, and then make a
Yeah.
determination of if this is any good. Right. And
Yeah.
so
I think a good rule of thumb for that is, how long does it take to play your game? If it's a long time, it's fine. It's long, but that'll start narrowing down who's going to buy the game, right? So if it's taking you, it's an all day game. That's a different amount. Those are different people then who are willing to do a one. Who you're in and out in an hour, right? That's
Yep.
why with the campaign games and with like the games I was designing, which are half an hour per scenario, it's like, yeah, but there's like, you can play dozens of these if you want, or a dozen or whatever, which means you can play for 1 hour or 1.5 or two. Like, you really got that versatility is great when you put it in, because then suddenly the appeal widens. Right?
Yep.
I mean, that's
Yep.
just a mechanical thing to do if someone wants to do that. But you're right. And the gentleman or whatever, the person who did the game, if they're creating a more robust, that's nice, robust, tactically, challenging set of rules, if that's going to change who the target market is, then you just have to market it differently. And I kind of wanted to disagree about this. Maybe that goes down to nothing, but man, some of the biggest games this year or last year were about mushrooms. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, wow. I mean, I like eating mushrooms, but am I going to play a game of mushrooms? I don't get like, but they did extremely well, which kind of tells me something. Either because there's also the other one that did really well with the flowers, right? And even though, botany, exactly. So there might be a whole market out there who likes like that nature kind of related.
Yeah.
Who like it.
I think
But
so.
I guess what I'm also, one other aspect is that I think some people just like games. And so there's that market of people just want to get whatever the theme is, something cool. Yeah.
Yeah. That I'll say for elegance, for me, elegance, another way to rephrase the word elegance is deceptive simplicity. So strategic depth is simple on the surface, but the depth is evident in the actual gameplay. But if the depth is evident in the like numbers that you have to add up together, if you need a calculator or a companion app or something like that, that to me is not strategic depth as much as it is just math and complexity. And I don't think complexity and depth are the same thing at all. And so what I'll tell newer publishers is to find a way to make it feel the exact same with fewer components. Find a way to make it feel the exact same with fewer components or fewer steps. And so, like, what is the goal of the experience you want to get?
That would mean abstracting stuff, right?
Right.
You have to abstract out. And
yeah. So like one example that people bring up a lot actually when they play Deliverance is so Star Wars Rebellion is a game that is done on a grid, like a square grid. similar to Deliverance. It's kind of a tactical combat game, Rebels against the Imperial Alliance or whatever. And you've got the line of sight rules in that game are very complex. And you've got, like, am I obstructed? Am I partially obstructed? Can these two corners of the square that I'm in see at least one corner of the square that you're in? Or can I draw a line directly to the center of the square that you're in from these two sides and all that? And that there's some people will be willing to do that, but there are a lot of people that just think that's extra fluff, and
those are my game has that. That's how I do my game, and there's a lot of people who love it. So
so
it doesn't matter.
I decided,
it's just a different game.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. But what I am getting at is, where's the strategic depth? And for Deliverance, for example, I wanted that tactical combat, but I did not want to have calculations in the game. So for me, it's like, we did kind of a Final Fantasy Tactics or Fire Emblem system where it's like, your range 4. That means you can calculate 4 spaces away from you, in a orthogonal adjacent, like up, down, left, or right, 4 spaces away. Anything you can see in 4 spaces is good. If you bend your bullet around a wall, that's totally fine. There's no like kind of line of sight rules, which make it very simple. So I strip out that, but I wanted to make it feel like you're this epically powerful angel slaying demons and that kind of thing. And, the depth itself is really in the character and their actions. Like the tableau that's in front of you is a very
that's
rich
something your theme can really
right?
tap into, right? Because you're not limited by 3-dimensional space, because these are technically like fights happening in hyperdimensional spaces. So it makes sense that arrows can like go around corners and hit demons, because there's like an element of fantasy that's been incorporated into this.
Yeah, so I think that would be very strange if you applied my system to like your Escape from Stalingrad or Project Reese. That would be very weird. It's like he just shot his AK-47 around the corner. How did that happen?
Yeah, they didn't have AK-47.
I'm just I'm thinking of GoldenEye, like KS7 Soviet weapons or the Golden Gun.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Yeah. There's I guess what it shows you is that there's different ways to skin a cat, so to speak. And some, it's just, your market. Some markets like to have the crunchiness. They want to feel like it's closer to realism for them, the better, right? That's for me where I'm always like the balancing act. How real but playable, playable but real, right? And so my audience who enjoy the game, they want to tactically maneuver themselves in a way that they can't get shot at, and that makes sense to them how they're handling themselves. They stay behind cover as much as possible, and that for that game it matters. But it does add that whole aspect of how do you who sees what you can see, right?
I think
but there's clever solutions. There's clever solutions to all that sort of stuff, and I guess what like we said at the beginning, if it's a game you like playing, that's the first place to look. What type of other games you play, what interests you? Those people are out there, right? Well, unless you're the really, 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 really an alien, basically, they're out there. So you can find them. They're there. Just find your,
Well, at the end of the day, what it comes down to is that you make your game for a group of people that love it. I think that if, let's say, Marco you were to make, your I forget what the system is called.
Paths Unknown? You mean?
The Paths Unknown system. If you were to take that Paths Unknown system and just entirely strip out line of sight, your audience would not appreciate the game more. They might say, yeah, the game is easier to play, but I'm less interested in it. And for me, if I were to add that system, that kind of line of sight system into my game, my audience would appreciate it less, even though they would, probably slog through and learn and, to play it and whatnot. But both of those things.
It slows the game down. The thing is too that it slows down.
But we learned that our target markets, our people, we know what they like, in a certain, in many ways. And the more that we learn, I feel like for me, the more that I'm able to give them what they want, which is really the end goal. So like one of the things we've done, we've given free scenarios every quarter we'll release a free scenario pack, which is like 1 to 3 missions for deliverance to all the fans. And they really love that because they're looking for more content. We have a way to do it via PDF and everything. And they just generally very much appreciate it. So, but I learned that they love the campaign and they love that unique set of victory conditions and map setup and whatnot. And I'm just leaning into that. And my audience is responding with great appreciation because I've learned, over time. And I think that's really what it's about. Like we have to learn over time and place ourselves into a position where we can learn, where we can listen to our audiences, where we can make a game that people are first passionate about. That's like step one. It's a really difficult step. It took me 7 years to do that. But after that, it's like, you've got to listen to your people and to what it is that they like. How do you keep an ear to the ground to listen to your people and what it is they like? For me, it's the community, like Facebook group, Discord community, that kind of thing, those are very active.
They're there. And once you get to that stage, you're in a good position to learn more and more, right? And for people who are starting out, you first got to make your game, and then you've got to, introduce yourself to people online. I mean, the physical aspect of running games, that's great. That's more limited and it takes longer and they even cost money. But online, it's there. It's like literally there right now.
Yep.
Right now, you can just go and start introducing your game to people in a very, and get things rolling. We're like this exact second.
Yep.
That's the important thing. You can do it right now. It's on. It's Facebook. They'll listen to you. Introduce yourself. Find the group. Just do it. It's like literally there right now. I can get off this now and find a whole new group that I can talk to if I wanted to, right? So it's there. Take the steps. Introduce yourself. Put yourself out there. Share your game. Make a PNP. Share that on the PNP places. Work on a solo variant. Even if it's hard, work on it. Talk to the solo. I'm working on a solo. Like, just find the reasons for doing stuff. Those things will help you sell your game. Those things will help find out who you're targeting, and they'll make your game more appealing to a wider audience just by having those aspects to it. Solo, PNP, things like that.
Love it. So Marco, lastly, just real quick, share the game that you're working on, where they can find it.
Okay, well, I'll keep it simple. It's called The Cats of Mont Saint Michel. It's on GameFound. And maybe you guys will provide a link, but you can check it out there. We have almost 4,000 followers with a few weeks still to go. So it's going really strong. And other little piece of, and you can find it there. And if you like it, you can follow it and check out more information.
That's awesome. All right. Well, then we're going to have Robot Richard send us on out.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. For more resources, articles, and to listen to past podcasts, please visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And if you have a crowdfunding question, we also have a page on our site where you can send a message directly to us. Please visit crowdfundingnerds.com/question. And if your question is a great question, we may include it in a future podcast. Thank you all again for listening to this week's episode, and we'll see you next week. Stay nerdy.